Welcome to the Resilience series. I'm Stephanie Weaver, author of the almost out Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which is out next week and has a theme of resilience. My guest today is Laura Engel. Laura is the president of the San Diego Memoir Writers Association and a member of the International Women Writers Guild. Her memoir, You'll Forget This Ever Happened, was recently released. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Stephanie. So happy to be here.
So I need to start with a little bit of a disclaimer because Laura and I were in a memoir critique group for over a year, and I heard a very large part of this story that's in her book in that group. And so we developed a really special relationship during that time, a friendship. I also really felt a lot of connection to the book because I heard so much of it. So I just wanted to say that up front. I'm a little biased. You had not planned on being a writer or a memoirist. What happened to change that, and how old were you when that started?
Actually, I always loved writing. Even when I was a little girl, I would write stories. I took journalism in high school, and I always thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer or a teacher. That's what I wanted to be. But life got in the way, and I never really wrote anything uh, until I retired. I was 68 years old, and I had planned to take some writing classes. It was time. I'd had time, free time now, and I thought, oh, this will be so great. Well, little did I know, I would not be writing what I thought I'd be writing. I had planned on writing a little, um, maybe some stories about my family, a book that I could just have for my children, that kind of thing, something I could leave with my grandchildren. And then a miracle happened in my life, and I started writing about it in a journal. And the journal turned into going to writing classes. And after taking some memoir classes, I decided my story could be a memoir. And it began to consume me. And that's all I wanted to do was write this book. And that's how it happened. And I was 68 years old.
That's amazing. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to have Laura on the show was, well, there's a bunch of reasons, but that's one of them. It's never too late. You're never too old. It's something you can do at any age. So the majority of your book takes place in 1967 when you were 17. What happened that year that changed your life forever?
When I was a teenager, I was your typical high school senior, going through life, carefree, had all these plans for the future, and I found myself pregnant. And there's not much worse of a thing you can do back in 1967 than to be an unwed mother, a young teenage girl who was pregnant with a boyfriend who joined the army and had no plans to marry her. So what happened was my parents took me to an unwed mother's home. And I don't want it to sound like they abandoned me there, but pretty much I lived there for 5 months, gave birth to my son, my firstborn son. And from the time you were entered into this place, you were told you would, leave your child and you would forget about the child. You would go back to your life, and you were doing such a wonderful thing. You were sacrificing yourself and having this child go to a family that would take care of it with a mom and dad. And you just couldn't do this. And there was no hope for you. And so I went along with it. And
So I'm just going to interrupt. So what state did you live in, and then where did you end up giving birth?
I lived in Mississippi. I was born and raised on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. And then this unwed mother's home was in New Orleans, Louisiana. So it was a completely new experience for me. I was from a small town, small beach town. And all of a sudden, here I was in the big city of New Orleans in this pretty decrepit neighborhood and almost imprisoned, And it was a very sad, horrible time. It it changed me in many ways. I would never be that carefree teenager again. And I was devastated to have to leave my son. I didn't do it willingly. I did it because I had to. I had no choice. There was
Yeah.
no choice.
Um, so part of the reason why Laura's book feels so important now is not just that it's her personal story, but with the possible reversal of Roe versus Wade, You were forced to give up your child for adoption. And what do you want people to know about that experience and its impact on your life as well as on your child's life?
Well, first of all, I had no idea that we would be going through all of this when I was writing my book. Um, I actually had thought my book is a lot about DNA as well, as because that's how my son found me 49 years later. And I had thought I would be writing about the DNA story that we're all hearing now quite a bit. But then when my book was published in May, and released in May, I should say, um, I I realized, wow, in so many ways, our country's going through the same types of things it was going through when I was a teenager. In the 1960s were very turbulent years. They were confusing years. You were being told, be a good girl. There was, no birth control classes. There was nothing that would direct us into if we did happen to get pregnant. There was no help. There was no socialized help, I should say. There was nothing from the government to help you out. You were just, all of a sudden, you were a bad girl, even though we're living in the age of sex and rock and roll and free love and the summer of love and all that. So it was quite a confusing year. When I realized that what's happening right now is almost the same thing. I mean, it's like going backwards. Women not having a choice. For instance, Planned Parenthood possibly disappearing, when this is what women need so badly. Women need to have choices. By not having a choice, my whole life went in a crazy direction, and a sadness, a depression, a hole in my heart that I don't think I had to have if things had been different, if I had been given a choice or help. And so it breaks my heart to think that we would go backwards again into a time where women, like I was, young women or older women even, no choice, no direction, no help. That is
Yeah.
backward.
And even one of the things that really struck me was, there was obviously no sex education. So, it was clear you didn't even really know whether or not you were pregnant and what that might be that was happening to your body. And so that to me also really stood out because there's, the people that are pro birth are also anti sex education. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's this strange conundrum of, well, how do you reconcile those two things? An adoption is often sort of touted as the solution to abortion. But you wouldn't have chosen to have an abortion. You wanted this baby. What do you say to the idea that adoption is a solution to abortion?
I don't, I don't buy into it because I am a victim of by being a birth mother and being told this is what you're doing, whether you like it or not. You have no choice. We really don't care how you feel. And we don't think you would be a good mother. I am a good mother. I went on to have more children, and I would have been a good mother, even as a young teenager, because I was very mature, especially after going through that experience. I feel like the worst thing in the world was that we did have no education, and that their birth control was not available. I know this probably would not have happened to me if birth control had been available. I know that I would not have had an abortion because that was suggested by the boyfriend I had. And even at that young age, that was not a solution to me. I think adoption was not, it was all I could do, but I think it was damaging. In fact, I don't think it, I know it. It damaged me. And then once my son was back in my life, 49 years later, I'd never seen him. I'd never known where he was. It was closed adoption. I wondered about him every day of my life. And then when we finally did meet, when he was 49 years old, I realized the damage that had been done to him as well. By severing a child from its mother is not a solution. It causes so many problems for both parties. And I realize there is a need for adoption in some cases, and I do understand that. But at the same time, I think forced adoption is not the answer at all.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And I don't want to give too much away, so I do want you all to read the book. But the book does detail and explain how they reconnected and what that experience was like for both of them, as well as the impact this had on Laura's life. So, Laura, how do you define resilience?
Oh, resilience. When I think of resilience, I think of a power inside of us that that we sometimes don't even realize we have. It is the ability to push through trauma, push through adversity, and look ahead and know that there is still good in the world, or good for us, and to look at your blessings. I know that I've had a lot of times in my life that I would think it was the end of the world. And then there's always that bright light that says there's something in the future. And I think resilience is one of the most wonderful things in the world. And I know that many of us have it. And I feel bad for the people that can't pull themselves out of whatever they're going through and just forge ahead.
Thank you. So, the last question I ask everyone is, what are some self care resilience strategies that you personally find most helpful?
When I was writing my book, I went through a time where it was almost like I was back in 1967. It was very strange. I was in a trance type thing when I would be writing. And I'd actually have to pull myself away from the computer and just leave it. And I find I do that with other things too. When I need self-care, I change wherever I'm at. I go into whether it's a change of scenery, movement, walking. I believe in eating right, taking care of myself, loving myself. And I think by loving and forgiving myself for things that I always felt, you know, maybe I could have avoided if I'd done this or that. I think just the fact that I can step back and say, you did the best you can do, you know, love yourself, love yourself like you would a friend who's going through this rough time. And that's one of the self-care things I do. I do know that connecting with the fact that I have a lot of good in my life by journaling, talking to friends, talking to my husband, and just, I've learned the hard way not to keep secrets, to just say, this is what's going on inside of me. And that's been my self-care.
That's awesome. I love that question because I get a different answer every time.
I bet.
Laura, thank you again for being here today and sharing your work and your story. Please visit lauralengel.com to learn more about her work and her book. You can order You'll Forget It Ever Happened wherever you like to buy books. And we do encourage you to use independent bookstores if you can. Authors make more money that way, and it also really supports that great resource in your community. Check out other episodes of the Resilience series on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Follow me at sweavermph to learn more about my just about to be released book, the Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook. Thanks so much for watching.